Have you ever wanted to watch a movie that takes place during World War II and is about gremlins? Shadow in the Cloud was released in 2020, written and directed by Roseanne Liang, originally written by Max Landis, but was actually rewritten by Roseanne Liang due to controversies back in 2019 involving Max Landis being an apparent piece of shit. Basically, this movie is about a character named Maud who hitches a ride on an American B-17 bomber during World War II. She is apparently on a top secret mission and has a bag with her containing top secret materials. 49 minutes out of the 83-minute runtime are spent with Maud in this ball turret completely by herself talking over the radio. Although this style of tension building has worked in the past with movies like Locke starring Tom Hardy, this movie makes 49 minutes feel like an eternity. Most of the characters' interactions are through radio conversations, which again could be a very interesting way to build tension. I personally feel there were a few directions this movie could have went that would have made it significantly more interesting. However, this is one of those movies where it's pretty straightforward and what you see is what you get. My biggest issue with this movie, besides of how ridiculous it is the fact that it has a 77% certified fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes. And for that I say, excuse me? Huh? Are you serious? Not only are most movies nowadays given a plump red tomato as if it's a Little League Championship participation trophy, but for the movies that actually put in the time, effort, and money, they are penalized because they get held to a higher standard. I remember way back when those maters actually used to mean something. Nowadays, they'll just give that shit to anybody. I feel that so many critics are quicker to hate on popular movies to have a clickbait take instead of reviewing all movies to the same standard, which is personally what I try to do. Now, typically, yes, I pick bad movies usually to review, so I know what I'm getting myself into. Lately, I've been looking out for movies that people don't like and try to outline why most people didn't like them. I don't think trying to find reasons as to why a movie is good or bad based on how unpopular or popular the take is an honest way to review a movie. But then again, what do I know? Take, for example, Avatar: The Way of Water. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that that movie is an amazing masterpiece or is even great, but the idea that Shadow in the Cloud has a higher certified fresh score than that movie is where you can really see how disjointed the rating system is on Rotten Tomatoes. Movies are reviewed on such a curve that it's impossible to get an accurate gauge on whether a movie is good anymore because it's good or because the critics feel bad leaving a bad review. I could go on for another hour about why I have come to despise the nonsensical ways Rotten Tomato critics justify giving ratings to movies anymore. I mean, look at the audience ratings of this movie. It is significantly lower, which I feel is a way more accurate depiction as to whether or not this movie is enjoyable or even worth watching. I mean, look at the IMDb score. Look at the Metacritic score. Most people who watch this movie who aren't movie critics did not like this movie. But again, it's certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, which to me completely undervalues what that actually means. Alright, as always guys, I'm going to be going through this movie and I'm going to be spoiling it. Not that there's too much really to spoil, there's not really much that happens that isn't in the trailer, but you know, just a warning. Alright, so now that that's out of the way, the spoilers start in 3, 2, 1. Alright, so this movie starts with our main character, Maud Garrett, and she's given a top secret package to transport from Auckland, New Zealand to Samoa in August of 1943. Maud arrives at the airbase at night and finds her transport, an American B-17 bomber named the Fool's Errand. The crew, who are mainly made up of one-dimensional misogynistic men, greet her as she is placed for takeoff in the only empty seat, a ball turret. So she's carrying this bag that apparently has top secret information in it, but with no space for her bag, she reluctantly allows the only decent person on board, Walter Quaid, to keep it safe during takeoff. During takeoff, while she's in this ball turret, she sees this enemy plane, which is confirmed by the navigator, Finch, but no one believes her. Because she's a girl, Pilot Reeves and co-pilot Williams doubt her ability to identify aircraft. Because she's a girl, Maud later sees a winged creature on the underside of the bomber's wing. She reports it, but most of the crew dismisses her because she's a girl, except for one crew member who also sees it. It's at this point where the hatch of the ball turret malfunctions and traps her inside. The crew then begins to try to help her get out. She is then further insulted by the crew because they're all pieces of shit. They then abandon their attempts to open the hatch and turn off the intercom after she stands up for herself. The creature, which is a gremlin, attacks Maud and she fights it off but gets injured in the process. Personally, I think one of the things that would have made this movie significantly more interesting is if the gremlin was all in their heads. And instead of an actual creature that really never gets an explanation, it could have just been a metaphor for maybe just the plane being destroyed by the Japanese bomber. I personally think that this is one of the many directions this movie could have went that would have given it more depth and made it more interesting. For a good portion of the movie, I honestly thought that it was all in her head, and I was actually a little bit more invested in the story. But since the gremlin is real, and we ultimately get zero explanation as to what this creature is or what its motives are, it comes off as just a boring CGI creature that is evil just to be evil. But more on that in a little bit. Anyway, it's at this point where she fires a gun and the crew overhears it. The crew contacts her to ask her what happened, but it's at this point that the radio operator finally confronts her and asks her who she really is. He insists that Maud Garrett does not exist and is not registered for their flight. They begin to remove her for questioning, but Maud then jams the turret's gears, making it impossible for them to open the door. It's at this point when a Japanese aircraft appears and starts to open fire on the plane. In the chaos, Maud switches to an American accent, takes control of the gun turret, and shoots down the fighter, earning the crew's respect. Maud then confirms to the crew that everything she said about herself was in fact true, however, she used her maiden name to hitch a ride on the flight. She still refuses to disclose her mission's details due to its secrecy. She continues to see the gremlin sabotaging the bomber, at which point another crew member finally sees it as well. However, the rest of the crew do not believe them. It's at this point that Pilot Reeves suspects that Maud's assignment is what's causing all of their problems. He then orders the package to be opened, revealing that it's a baby that was sleeping through all of the gunfire and yelling because it was sedated. The baby is actually Maud and Sergeant Quaid's illegitimate child. Maud confesses that she had an affair with Quaid after she was mistreated by her husband. She decided not to inform Quaid about her pregnancy because she didn't want to involve him in it. She then faked her assignment to escape her husband. It's at this point that the crew decides to turn back to the airbase where they took off from. So as the crew heads back, they are attacked by 3 Japanese fighters, and the gremlin boards the bomber, injuring Quaid and kidnapping the infant for reasons. This is another opportunity where I feel the movie could have benefited from the gremlin being all in their head. Why does the gremlin want the baby? It is never explained. If the gremlin was all in their head, it would just be their mind playing tricks on them, which I think would have been an interesting twist. We never really understand why the gremlin is kidnapping the baby, but apparently it wants the baby for some reason. It's at this point where things get real crazy. Maud exits the turret and fires at the gremlin, causing it to flee, but leaving the bag dangling from the plane as it flies at 100 miles an hour. Maud then climbs under the wing, retrieving the child. At this point, the ball turret finally falls off, leaving a big hole in the bottom of the plane. Maud then climbs back under the plane to the opening that the ball turret left. There's this one scene where Maud falls out of the plane, but the explosion of one of the Japanese fighters propels her back up perfectly through the hole that she just fell out of. I mean, I don't need to go into the physics of this, so whatever. We're almost at the end, guys. We're almost at the end of this movie, so bring back a gremlin. Where's the gremlins at? So anyway, after she saves the baby and then falls out of the plane, but then gets blasted up back through the hole, the gremlin reappears and kills this guy, and then Maud throws it out of the plane. Next, Reeves, Finch, and Dorn are killed by the Japanese machine gun fire, leaving Maud in command. She manages to bring down the heavily damaged bomber in a controlled crash landing. It's at this point where the gremlin reappears and tries to take the baby again for reasons we don't know. Now, this is another one of those scenes that just doesn't make any sense. And I'm not saying that this movie has made sense the whole time, but it's the simplicity of it not making sense. And what I mean by that is this. The gremlin takes the baby from where they are, then starts running away, but then somehow runs directly into Maud. I mean, it just... right? I mean, these are the things you plan for. These are the things you storyboard out. But again, it doesn't really seem like they care about things making sense. But whatever, who cares? It's at this point where Maud kills the gremlin. She has this hand-to-hand combat scene, and if it sounds ridiculous, it's because this whole movie is ridiculous. The idea that this scene wasn't torn apart by critics is where it just blows my mind. After the one-on-one fistfight with the CGI gremlin, while everyone else just sits around and watches, she kills it, saving her child as well as the rest of the survivors. So that's the movie, and you know, after all that, the baby survives, the gremlin dies. You know, what more do you want from a gremlin film? At the end of the day, I understand the kind of movie they were trying to make, but for me, it just didn't hold my attention. The scenarios were completely nonsensical, a lot of the characters were very unlikable, the CGI was mediocre at best, the dialogue was dull and boring at times, and the fact that she's stuck in this ball turret for such a long time made it so agonizing to sit through. Now, I'm not trying to yuck anybody's yum. If you like this movie, then, you know, good for you. At the end of the day, this is just my opinion, and this is why I didn't enjoy it. I almost didn't even make this review, because so little actually happens in this movie. More than 60% of the movie is her just talking on the radio in the ball turret. But when I saw the 77% certified fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes, I had to at least say something. Some of the movies that I really enjoy and will rewatch over and over again until the day I die don't even have a tomato, because I feel like they came out during a time where they weren't just handing them to anybody. But for this movie to get the praise that it did from the critics really just rubbed me the wrong way. It's probably just a pet peeve of mine. Who cares that the critics like this movie? You know, whatever. At the end of the day, it doesn't really mean anything. People are gonna like or dislike these movies whether the critics tell them to or not. But anyway, that's pretty much all I have to say about this one. Lately, I've been doing these shorter reviews just to see how they hold up compared to the other ones. Personally, I like doing the longer videos, but there haven't really been many movies that I've wanted to do deep dives into. I am currently working on a long video about a beloved franchise, but that will probably not be out for a little bit because I don't want to rush it. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. Thanks again so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.